ever-growing, silent, invisible danger lurks all around us. Yes, this killer has grown much less formidable in the past decades, but still it lingers, waiting to strike. This killer is air pollution. Specifically, tiny particulates that in the air that, under the right conditions, make downtown Denver appear to be covered in a brownish haze. Being concerned with how safe we are in these conditions and what is being done to counteract and keep them under control prompted us to reach out to local experts. We chose to interview the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, or the CDPHE for short. The CDPHE monitors the direct effects of the environment on the population of Colorado, and vice versa, how the people of Colorado affect, intentionally or unintentionally, the environment. They monitor the public's health over a period of time in order to better understand trends and patterns and predict future hazards. This is a quote from their website. Our environment affects our health and we affect our environment. The CDPHE is the overarching department which holds many smaller independent divisions. We were directed to the Colorado Air Pollution Control Division, where we had the pleasure of speaking with Alex Nybergal, the communications and marketing specialist, and Jeremy, excuse me if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly, but Nustifer, an air quality planner.
Generally, when you hear smog, you're thinking of visibility impairment. So it's a really smoggy day, you can't see that well. But in terms of the science behind smog, the main pollutant that we're dealing with is ground level ozone. So you have ozone that's good, it's in the stratosphere, the upper layer of the atmosphere, and that's protecting us from harmful rays from the sun, right? Well, at ground level, ozone is actually created from pollution, as you talked about. It's the photochemical reaction of volatile organic compounds. So compounds that come off of, organics that come off of like gasoline type petroleum products and so forth, paints, stuff like that. And then with oxides of nitrogen, they react in the presence of sun to create ground level ozone. Well, other things that create poor air quality are wildfires, natural events like major wind blowing, dust storms, stuff like that. Here in Denver, we are what's called a non-attainment area for ozone, so that means that we don't meet the ozone national ambient air quality standards that are set by the Federal Clean Air Act. And in Denver, we have these peculiar issues because we have the mountains right next to us. So we have this cyclone effect where pollutants might stay high in the atmosphere and then they come back into Denver.
Air quality in Denver is better when it's windy because air pollutants get pushed out of the air in the area. The Denver area has a number of factors that affect the air quality. One of the factors that make Denver's air quality peculiar is the cyclone effect due to the proximity to the mountains and the city. The cyclone effect is air pollutants staying high in atmosphere near the mountains and then coming back down into Denver. The air moves through a large convective cycle with air from lower in the atmosphere cycling towards the mountains and back down. When the air cycles up to the mountains, the air quality in Denver is better because air pollutants are blown higher into the atmosphere. But as the air cycles back, so do part of the air pollutants.
So we have these weather events that actually cause emissions from other areas to come into Denver and create air quality problems. So we have there's a lot of academics that study Denver air quality because it's so complex.
In the interview, Alex and Jeremy mentioned that there is a non-attainment area in Denver that doesn't exist in the rest of the state, meaning Denver does not meet all of the air pollution standards. There are still fairly high levels of ozone pollution, and due to Denver's topography being right next to the Rocky Mountains, air pollution tends to come to Denver and it remains there longer than other places. This makes Denver worse off in terms of air pollution compared to other cities in Colorado. In general, Colorado has pretty clean air. Colorado's air has greatly improved since the passing of the Clean Air Act in 1970. Jeremy mentioned that the worst air quality in the U.S. is Southern California due to industry and shipping activity. A lot of air pollution from other countries travel to California via ships and trade processes. The East Coast also struggles with air quality issues because many of the industries are older and it has taken longer for governments to pass laws that would control the pollution of these industries. This graph shows the varying levels of ozone across the world, since ozone was Colorado's biggest issue in terms of air pollution. As you can see, the areas with the highest ozone levels are more developed regions like the US and China, but also occur in the Middle East, South Asia, and parts of Central Sub-Saharan Africa. Factors behind this include not only anthropogenic pollution, but topographical explanations as well.
But we do have issues in Denver, and as I said, the topography of Denver itself, being hugged up next to the mountains, creates this issue where we tend to have higher pollution events that, where say in Nebraska or something like that, it's just going to blow away. So our planning for air quality is almost entirely dictated by the Colorado Air Pollution Prevention and Control Act. So this is the Colorado law. It's about this thick. So it's a pretty big law. And this is what tells us what to do, effectively.
The Colorado Air Pollution Prevention and Control Act was put in place to foster the health, welfare, convenience, and comfort of the inhabitants of the state of Colorado, and to facilitate the enjoyment and use of the scenic and natural resources of the state. Its goal is to achieve the maximum practical degree of air purity in every portion of the state, to attain and maintain the national ambient air quality standards, and to prevent the significant deterioration of air quality in those portions of the state where the air quality is better than the national ambient air quality standards. It also requires the use of all available practical methods that are technologically feasible and economically reasonable to be used as to reduce, prevent, and control air pollution throughout the state of Colorado.
So this was enacted in conjunction right after the Federal Clean Air Act the first Federal Clean Air Act was in the 50s, but the first real Clean Air Act with teeth was in the 1970s, and it was later amended in 1990. And then that is this. So this is the Federal Clean Air Act of 1990. It's pretty big, and it's widely considered the most complicated environmental law ever.
The Clean Air Act is the comprehensive federal law that regulates air emissions from stationary and mobile sources. Among other things, this law authorizes the EPA to establish the National Ambient Air Quality Standard to protect public health, welfare, and to regulate emissions of hazardous air pollutants. The act was amended in 1977 and 1979 and was meant to primarily set new dates for achieving the attainment of national standards, since many areas of the country had failed to meet the deadlines. The 72 areas failing to meet for particulate matter and smog will have to implement RACT, reasonably available control technology, that controls a certain pollutant down to the specified limit. The new act strengthens the ability of the EPA and the states to enforce standards by requiring that all air pollution control obligations of an individual source be contained in a single 5-year operating permit.
When the Clean Air Act spawns a new requirement, it's our job to write the rules that implement and enforce those requirements. It has to be approved by EPA, and if we fail to do so, the federal government can actually withhold highway funding.
The Colorado Air Quality Advisory has a platform where they depict the air quality of Colorado. This analysis is known as the Air Quality Index and is used to explain air quality in the area and standardize varying air qualities. For the most part, the worst air quality in the summer was in the unhealthy sensitive group range. There are 6 criteria measured on different standards to explain and standardize whether the air is unhealthy or healthy. The air quality of a region can then be categorized into one of the 6 groups: good, moderate, unhealthy for sensitive groups, unhealthy, very unhealthy, and hazardous. 2 days in the unhealthy range last summer related to the wildfire. This was portrayed through the red color indicated for those days. There were 26 days of unhealthy for sensitive group days this past summer as well.
Monitoring staff work.
Yeah,
They have people on call all the time who check this and forecast what the air quality is going to look like in the next 24 hours, and they'll issue air quality advisories if it looks like it's going to get into that unhealthy for sensitive groups range, and they'll also issue health advisories if it's going to get into that unhealthy for sensitive groups range, and then air quality advisories too.
I think individuals can just do little things that are important to do it. But most of your emissions come from your footprint, about how much electricity you're using, and also from your actual activities, mowing your lawn or filling up your gas tank, because there's emissions that come out of the gas tank, or driving your car is probably the biggest one. But generally speaking, air pollution issues come from bigger sources, industries, and that's where we come in. So we don't regulate you guys.